Everyone is laser focused on Iran right now. The IRGC, the naval standoffs, the nuclear talks. But stop for a second, because the most important damage from this crisis may not be happening inside Iran at all. Today, a country that hasn't taken a single missile strike, hasn't fired a single shot, and hasn't officially entered this war is absorbing one of the most serious strategic shocks of the entire conflict. That country is China. Iran may be the battlefield, but China may be the target audience. I am Winnie, a political scientist and international relations expert. Welcome to the Winnie Report, your straight-to-the-point source for military, geopolitical, and economic shifts that are actually reshaping the planet. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn the notifications on, because what I'm laying out is the most underreported dimension of this Iran crisis, and it could change how we understand the global balance of power. Over the last few days, I dug through every angle: diplomatic readouts, Bloomberg reporting, the Hudson Institute analysis, Jerusalem Post breakdowns, and every timeline of the Hormuz situation. What I uncovered is staggering. A decade-long silent empire that Beijing built is facing its biggest stress test in real time, without a single American bomb landing on Chinese soil. Here is the headline. China's $400 billion Iran framework is now facing its biggest stress test yet. The Hormuz blockade is squeezing China's energy system, its refiners, and parts of its factory base right now. And Xi Jinping's so-called fortress economy is showing real cracks from inside. Let's rewind so you understand the scale. Back in 2021, Beijing locked in that massive 25-year strategic partnership with Iran. $400 billion on the table. The plan was simple: secure a permanent flow of cheap energy and turn Iran into the unbreakable backbone of the Belt and Road westward push into Central Asia and beyond. On the ground, that meant Chinese firms looking into Iran's energy, minerals, telecom networks, and logistics corridor, while Iran ports and shadow shipping routes became central to Beijing's plan to keep discounted crude flowing east. Then came the shadow fleet, those ghost tankers running discounted Iranian crude straight to Chinese refineries. Beijing was taking roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports, keeping the regime alive under sanctions. Iran wasn't just a partner, it was the linchpin. Then February 28, 2026 arrived. US and Israeli strikes began hitting Iranian targets. Beijing's response? A strongly worded press release. After a $400 billion handshake in the years of calling each other strategic partners, that's all they offered when Iran needed real support. That single detail tells you everything. This was never a true alliance. It was a resource extraction deal wearing a friendship mask. Now the Hormuz blockade has turned that golden asset into a black hole. Billions in planned, financed, and politically connected infrastructure, from energy to logistics to telecom, are now trapped inside a war risk environment. The cheap oil pipeline China quietly relied on is being squeezed harder than at any point in years. Tankers tied to Iranian exports are now being intercepted, delayed, or forced into floating storage. The shadow fleet that once moved everything using fake flags, spoofed transponders, and mid-ocean transfers is no longer invincible. Washington is now targeting tankers, shipping firms, and refiners that made that system work. China's own customs data has shown zero Iranian oil imports on paper since 2022. Yet Malaysian crude was pouring in at 1.3 million barrels a day, more than double what Malaysia actually produces. You do the math. On April 19, 2026, the US forces seized the Iranian flagged Tuskar in the Gulf of Oman, with sources saying it was likely carrying dual-use items after stops in China and Malaysia. This is not just a blockade of the Iranian ports. It is a systematic pressure on one of the secret energy lifelines feeding China's refining system. Zoom inside China. This is where it stops being a theory and it starts hitting real factories and real workers. China pulls at least 5.4 million barrels a day through the Strait of Hormuz. Russia supplies only about 2.1 million. There's no quick pivot. It is mathematically impossible. And this is the part Beijing doesn't want to say out loud. China's energy security is not protected by strength. It is protected by uninterrupted movement through the narrow waters it does not control. Strategic reserves give them roughly 120 days. 120 days is not a strategy. It is a countdown clock. And the countdown clock changes behavior. They force factories, refiners, shipping firms, and governments to make decisions before the shelves are actually empty. Look at the factory floors right now. Chinese auto production has already dropped 27% in early April compared to last year, while factory closures in southern China show how quickly the pressure from disrupted materials can hit workers on the ground. In a country where public protest carries a real risk, that tells you how intense the pressure has become. This isn't abstract geopolitics. This is supply chain breaking on the ground. Aluminium, sulfur, petrochemicals, all spiking. Growth targets are now seriously in jeopardy. Then the United States delivered the clearest message yet. Sanctions on a major Chinese refinery, Washington accused of buying Iranian crude. That wasn't a warning. That was Beijing being told loud and clear, we see exactly how your system works, and we can reach straight into it. China's public response, more calls for peace and efforts again. Step back and the bigger picture becomes obvious. This crisis is exposing the fatal flaw of Xi Jinping's Belt and Road vision. Beijing sold itself as the stable, reliable partner that doesn't bring political drama. But when the number one partner in the region came under fire, China did nothing. From Jakarta to Riyadh to Islamabad, leaders are now asking the same question out loud. Is China a genuine strategic partner or just the world's biggest buyer of discounted resources? Once that question is asked, no amount of new ports or railways can unask it. Trust is breaking, and the damage will last decades. But here is where the story gets much bigger than Iran, because Beijing is not just watching what America is doing in Hormuz. Beijing is asking where America could do it next. The Hormuz crisis just proves something the United States never had to say out loud. America can militarize a critical choke point and turn maritime geography into economic pressure without ever declaring war with China. If Hormuz was the demonstration, the Malacca Strait is the real battlefield. Roughly 80% of China's oil imports pass through that narrow, vulnerable waterway surrounded by U.S. partners, friendly states, and American naval reach. Beijing has warned about the Malacca dilemma for decades. They just watched the exact playbook unfold in real time. China isn't collapsing, but China is being exposed. Exposed as a country whose factories depend on distant waters. Exposed as a power whose Belt and Road promises still depend on sea lanes it doesn't control. Exposed as a fortress economy with supply lines running through choke points watched by its greatest rival. And that is why Iran may be the battlefield, but China may be the real message. This is the hidden dimension of Iran war. Almost no one is talking about loudly enough. So drop your thoughts below. Is China more vulnerable than it has ever let the world believe? Subscribe right now, turn on notification. I will see you in the next one.